was an old man and there was an old woman and they lived in a house. Now the man and the woman and all of this world, all they had was one cow. And all they had in all of this world was one sheep. And they lived in that place, and one day when the sun was shining, the old man woke up and he stretched and he looked at the old woman and said, "It's your turn to go and look after the cow." And the woman said, "No." The man said, "Yes." And she said, "No, and no, and yes, and yes, and no, and no, and yes." And the two of them got so angry that they raised their hands and they shouted at each other, and no one looked after the cow that day. But the next day, when the sun came up, the old woman looked at the man and said, "It's your turn to go and look after the sheep." And the man said, "No." And she said, "Yes, and yes, and no, and no, and yes, and yes, and no, and no, and yes." And they sat there in that place and they raised their hands and they screamed and they yelled, and nobody looked after the sheep or the cow that day. Now on the third day, the old woman woke up and she stretched. She looked at the old man and said, "I want you to go and get me some food to eat." And the old man said, "Yes." Well, he got himself dressed. He said, "I'm very silly. I always shout and scream and yell." And down the stairs he went. And he went out through the door, and they were like squeaky doors. He went out through the door. And as he went out of the door, he picked up potatoes from out of the ground. And he listened, and he heard a voice, and the voice shouted out, "Help!" And he looked this way, and he looked that, and he looked up, he looked down, and he looked all around, and there he saw a pool of green, sticky mud. And in the mud there was a woman. The woman was no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and diamonds all over, and she was shouting, "Help me, help me, help me!" And the old man knew exactly who she was. She was the queen of the fairies, and if he helped her, then she would give him 1, 2, 3 magic wishes. He stepped into the mud. And he got hold of the little woman by her shoulders and he pulled her out of the mud, but he fell in the mud with a great big splash. And he had mud on his nose. He had mud in his hair. He had mud in his pockets. He had mud inside of his shoes. But the little woman, no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and diamonds all over, she said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. You've helped me. I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you not 1, not 2, but 3 magic wishes." The old man was very pleased. She said, "Have you got lots of cows?" And the old man said, "Ha! Do I look like I've got lots of cows? I've only got 1 cow." Well, the little woman, no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and diamonds all over, she said, "You could use 1 wish for a cow." "Have you got lots of sheep?" said the little woman. He said, "Ha! Do I look like I've got lots of sheep? I've only got 1 sheep." "Well, you could use a second wish to wish for a sheep." "Have you got a wife?" And the old man said, "Yes, I've got a wife. But I always argue with her, and I'm always cross." And she said, "I'm not going to give the wish to you. I'm going to give them to your wife. You'd better go home as quick as you like and see what she has wished for." The old man ran back home, and he opened up the door. And his wife said, "Where have you been?" He said, "I met a little woman, no bigger than this, with a crown on her head and a golden dress and silver boots and do you know? And she gave me, no, she gave you 3 magic wishes." "I don't believe you." "It's true, it's true. It's true as can be. True for you and true for me. Wish for something, see what you can see." "All right then," said the old woman. She said, I wish that there was a sausage on top of a fire and in a pan." And there was a rushing sound, and there was a rattling sound, and there was a great big crash, and down the chimney came a fire, and on top of the fire there was a pan, and in the pan there was a sausage, the biggest sausage in all of this world. And the old man started to dance. You see, it's true as can be. True for you and true for me. You wished for a sausage, and a sausage you can see." But when he danced, he knocked the pan over, and the sausage fell down on the ground and into the fire, and the old woman was angry. "You silly man, you're always dancing around. I wish that the sausage was on the end of your nose." and quicker than a wink or a blink of an eye, there was a rushing sound, and there was a rattling sound, and there was a great big crash, and the sausage slipped and slithered, crept and crawled, and it stuck itself right on the end of the old man's nose. The old man was still dancing, and he stamped on the sausage and he yelled, "Ow! Look what you've done! You've gone and turned my nose into a sausage!" The old woman ran over. She grabbed hold of his nose that was now a sausage, and she pulled. And the old man yelled, "Ow! You can't pull my nose off!" He sat down. He was very sad. And when he sat there, a tear rolled down his eyes and he spoke. "You had 3 wishes. You wished for a sausage, and you wished for the sausage on the end of my nose. You've only got 1 wish left. You'll have to wish for the sausage to come off my nose." And the old woman said, "No, you could stay inside of the house and wish for cows and wish for sheep and gold and silver and diamonds and a new house." And the old man cried, "You can't leave me with a sausage for my nose." The old woman looked at him. She couldn't stop herself. He did look funny with the sausage on the end of his nose. She went, "Look at you with the sausage. Don't laugh at me." "Oh, it's all right," said the old woman. And she said, I wish that the sausage would come off the end of the old man's nose." And there was a rushing sound and a rattling sound, and there was a great big crash, and the sausage came from the end of the old man's nose and rolled itself around in a circle on a plate. And the old man sat down, and the old woman sat down. She took a knife and a fork, cut some sausage and put it on his plate. She cut some more and put it on her own plate. And just as she was about to eat some of the sausage, she couldn't stop herself. She went, "You did look funny with the sausage." The old man couldn't stop. Two of them laughed and laughed. To think that in all of this world, all they got for 3 magic wishes was sausage for the supper. But the next day, the old woman, when she woke up and the sun was shining, she said, "Would you come and help me to look after the cow and the sheep?" And the old man said, "Yes." And the 2 of them, they went hand in hand down the stairs and out through the old squeaky door. Looked after the cow, looked after the sheep, and the 2 of them lived happily ever